Hello, welcome to Chef Richard's Kitchen. I'm Chef Richard Miller. Today I want to do a regional specialty food, and outside of Cincinnati and the tri-state, Ohio, Kentucky and Indiana area, this dish isn't real prevalent. Get within the city and you can't hardly go anywhere without finding it. And that of course is Cincinnati style chili. Now, the big thing about Cincinnati chili is it came from the Mediterranean years and years and years ago, and I'll get into a little of the history of it in a minute. But we call it chili, but it's actually more of a spicy spaghetti sauce because it's served over spaghetti with a mound of cheddar cheese on the top of it. And if you're thinking of this as a typical chili con carne, the Texas chili, you're going to be in for a disappointment. Think of it, as a very flavorful, spicy, say spaghetti sauce with cheese, and you'll love it. And they say, Cincinnati chili definitely grows on you. Well, everybody knows I'm not from Cincinnati to start with. I'm from Omaha. But I came up here one time on a business trip, and I stopped in at a chili restaurant, and I was thinking the same thing everybody else does. It's going to taste like Texas chili. And I go, huh? No, it wasn't. And I went back home thinking that that's got to be one of the worst experiences I've ever had. Well, fast forward, I end up moving to Cincinnati. And one day, some people from work says, "Come on, let's go to Skyline," which is the big Cincinnati chili parlors around here. And although I kind of must have looked a little stricken, they said, "Come on." Well, they say after the third time you're hooked. And I'm happy to say that I'm now addicted to Cincinnati chili, and I wouldn't. And although I love other chilies, there's always going to be a spot, in my heart for Cincinnati chili. Not that it's considered chili, or it's considered that, but it is called that. They say if you're in Cincinnati, you can throw a rock and not be able to hit a chili parlor, and that's probably right. There's a lot of them around. There's Empress, Dixie, Skyline, Gold Star, Camp Washington, Blue Ash, and a multitude of other chili restaurants. They all have their own unique recipe, but they're all very similar in that it has this Mediterranean flair. And most of that, comes from spices other than just, chili powder and hot sauce. It comes from, say, cardamom, coriander, nutmeg, cinnamon, things like that. So it's more of a Greek Mediterranean influence than it actually is, say, a Texas. Now the original Cincinnati chili came over from Bulgaria in about 1921, and this was after World War I. And the three brothers, Artemis, Ivan, and Agir Karajev, I believe were their names, which shortened them and Americanized them to Tom, John, and Aggie later on. They emigrated because I'm sure over there after the war, when Bulgaria had aligned itself with the German powers, they probably weren't treated real well. So they immigrated over here to America. They ended up landing in New York, moved to Cincinnati, and they had the recipes of their probably their mothers and ancestors of this spaghetti sauce, or however they wanted to call it at the time. And they opened up a restaurant right over in Kentucky, I believe it was in Newport, right next to the old Empress Burlesque. And there was an old burlesque theater over there called the Empress. And they basically opened it right next door to that, and they called it Empress Chili. And that was the first, case or the first recordings of a Cincinnati chili. And they used, since Bulgaria is just right on top of Greece, just north of it, they used mostly the Mediterranean seasoning, and that's where this came from. Now, fast forward about 25 years to when there is a fellow by the name of Nicholas Lambrinidis, who actually had worked at the Empress Chili and decided it was time to go off on his own. And Nicholas Lambrinidis actually was the founder of Skyline Chili. Get started. We're going to notice a few differences about this than making traditional chili. First of all, with traditional chili, you brown the meat and then make the chili out of it. Not with a Cincinnati chili. With Cincinnati chili, it's actually more boiled than anything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with 4 cups or a quart of beef broth. All right? And we're going to turn the heat on, and we're going to let this come up to a boil. And then we're going to put in some of our spices. And some of the spices we're going to be using are a 6-ounce can of tomato paste, salt, about a teaspoon or so of salt, probably 4 teaspoons, not tablespoons, teaspoons of chili powder, a little bit, probably a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. We got about a 1/4 to a 1/2 teaspoon of regular black pepper. We have 2 teaspoons of cardamom, 2 teaspoons of nutmeg, a teaspoon or about 3/4 teaspoon of allspice. I'm using a 1/2 teaspoon of cocoa powder in here. Now, every chili parlor around here swears there's no chocolate in their chili. And if there were, it'd probably be announced because, for people with chocolate allergies. I use it simply because it adds a little extra layer of flavor in there. And it also, tends to mellow it just a little bit. All right. We have some coriander, garlic, and I'm actually going to put just a little bit of cumin in there. And we have a tablespoon of white vinegar. And so, don't worry, I'll put all the ingredients at the end. I always do. Because I can't imagine you writing all this stuff down as I rattle it off. No. We're also going to use a little bit of cornstarch, a slurry in with water, and that's just simply because it's going to thicken it up, a little later on. And we probably won't put that, or we won't put that in until the end. All right. So, anyway, let's go ahead and let's let this heat up for just a second, and I'll be right back when it starts to boil. Don't go away. All right, now that the stock has come to a boil, let me put in my tomato paste. And I want to put this in before I put the meat in, just simply because it's much, much easier to get blended into the liquid when you don't have the beef in there. Now, a pound of ground beef, and I use the 85-15 ratio in here. The reason is, when you normally make something with ground beef, you often brown it, and then you have a chance to, drain the excess fat off of it, if it's something like 70% or 80% or something like that. Well, with this, remember, we're boiling it, so there isn't any time to actually pour the fat off. So I'm using a much leaner grade. Now, does that mean if there is a little fat, you can't get rid of it? Oh, heavens no. What it is, remember, fat will tend to rise, and we can take our ladle and we can all skim it off the top. I've heard, and people have called, Cincinnati chili, I've heard them call it grease gravy. Well, I hate to burst their bubble, but there really isn't hardly any grease in it. There's certainly less than most of them that use, ground beef in it. So if you hear that, don't let that put you off, because it's kind of a bunch of hooey. All right, now let's go ahead, and while we wait for this to cook, I'm going to go ahead and break it up. Cincinnati chili does not have the normal chunks in it like a con carne does. It's a very fine, grain of beef. So what you want to do is after this is cooked, I'm going to take my favorite year one potato masher, and I'm going to make sure that it's broken up, because that's the way Cincinnati chili is supposed to be. Alright, it looks like the ground beef is well cooked. There's no pink left in it. It's all brown. So now's the time we're going to break it into little fine pieces, because that's what Cincinnati chili is all about. An interesting story is, I remember when I was working as an application engineer for a company when I first moved up here to Cincinnati. I was going down to a customer of ours down in Texas, and while we were going out, they took me to a place that had the typical Texas chili in it. Delicious. And the big thing down there is, they said, anybody that knows beans about chili knows chili has no beans. Well, in Texas, the big thing is, chili isn't supposed to have beans. The thing of it is, I only found one place down there that was serving chili without beans in it. So, so much for that. Anyway, I mentioned, Cincinnati chili. And, oh my goodness, you should have seen people go pale in there. Oh, no, that can't be right. The interesting part of the story is they came up to Cincinnati later, for user and system administrator training, which I was giving, and we took them to a chili parlor, Skyline as a matter of fact. They tried it, they loved it, so, you know, so much for the purity of chili. Now, let's go ahead and let's put in some of our other ingredients. Remember, we've got a tablespoon of white vinegar. I've seen some recipes where they actually call for apple cider vinegar. Your choice. I kind of prefer the white, you know. A teaspoon and a half of salt. 4 teaspoons, not tablespoons, teaspoons of chili powder. Now I'm going to go ahead and whisk this together periodically, and that's just mainly because I don't want to get this big mound in there and have it tough to whisk in. Black pepper, cardamom, nutmeg. It's starting to become very fragrant and aromatic. All right. Allspice. Garlic powder, coriander, and of course the dried cocoa. Or the cocoa powder. Now, remember what I used to tell you? Taste it. It's very, very good. It's starting to get a little snap in there. But one of the things that a man once said about Cincinnati chili, and the reason he liked one chili restaurant over the other here in Cincinnati, was because he said one of them kind of made his lips tingle and made his lips numb a little bit. And that, to me, is what it's supposed to do. Is it's just supposed to have enough heat in there to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add just a little bit of the cumin, and probably about half my cayenne pepper. Now cayenne pepper is one of those spices, and I've even used them on here many times, and cayenne in very small doses does not make a lot of heat. Cayenne pepper is just a pinch, will actually help brighten, the different flavors in there. Put in a tablespoon of it, yeah, you're going to have heat, but by and large, no. Much better. I am going to put the rest of the cayenne in there, the rest of the cumin, and we may just have to go ahead, and if we want a little more heat, we may want to take and just shake a little more cayenne in there. All right. So now here we have our chili. For all intents and purposes, the making of it, with the exception of the cornstarch, is done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this down, and I'm going to set it on about 180 degrees, and I'm going to go ahead and let it simmer for probably 20-30 minutes, something like that. Let the flavors meld in there together, and then we'll kind of take a final taste of it, see if there's anything else that's needed in there. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to cover it, and I'll be back in about 20-30 minutes. Don't go far. All right, it's been about 30 minutes, something like that, and I went ahead and I tasted it, and I added another half teaspoon of both nutmeg and cinnamon to it, and probably another couple of shakes of cayenne pepper. So we're probably up to about a quarter teaspoon, or maybe a little bit more. I went ahead and tasted it. It's delicious. So what I want to do now is I put the spaghetti on the stove, because you can't have Cincinnati chili without spaghetti. And now let me put a little cornstarch slurry in here. There. That's probably about 2 tablespoons worth. I put in more than that just in case we needed it, but we don't. All right, so let me go ahead and turn this down again. That's just at the right consistency. Just the right flavor. So let's go ahead, and while the spaghetti cooks, I'll set up and we'll get ready to plate. So I'll be right back. All right, now there are a couple of rules, unwritten rules of course, when it comes to Cincinnati chili. Number one, you'll never find it served, other than on an oval plate. So we got to have an oval plate. All right, first thing we do, we lay down the spaghetti. Second thing, we go ahead and we put our chili on top of it. And third, you have to have very fine, not the coarse grated, but very fine grated mild cheddar cheese. And here we have Cincinnati chili. This is what we call a three-way. Now, Cincinnati chili is served what they call in ways. A two-way is just the spaghetti and the chili, is just the spaghetti and the chili on top of it. Very rarely seen in Cincinnati, although you generally can order it. A three-way, which is by far the most common here, is spaghetti, the chili, and the cheddar cheese. If you want a 4-way or 5-way, it involves onions, diced onions, and red chili beans that are drained. A 4-way is simply a 3-way with either beans or onions. A 5-way, of course, is a 3-way with both beans and onions. Now, there is one chili restaurant here that orders a 6th way, and that's with sliced garlic on it. I've never tried it, so I really can't say, what it is, how it is, or anything else like that. But that's my favorite, is a 3-way. The second rule that's unwritten in Cincinnati is whenever you order a 3-way or anything, you usually order a coney with it. Now the coney is just the old Mediterranean name for a hot dog. It really has nothing to do with, Coney Island or in New York or anything else like that. But what that is you take your hot dog bun there, and you put some mustard on it. You put some onion, now you go ahead and you put your hot dog in there. Now I always use an all beef hot dog. I'm not real sure, what the chili restaurants use, but at least mine, for anybody that has, reasons not to have pork or whatever, I always use all beef. So go ahead and put your hot dog in there. In Cincinnati, these conies are just a little shorter than a regular hot dog. In my case, I'm just using a regular hot dog on it. It's fine. Now you put the chili on top. And since it's Cincinnati chili, you have to have some cheese on it. All right? So now, here we've had a 3-way. Here you see how we make the cheese coney. Now, it's your turn. Go out and give this a try. Other than some spices, it's not an expensive recipe at all to make. A little ground beef, a hot dog, and some cheese, and that's about it. So go ahead, try it. I like it. Now remember that you can't think of it as chili con carne, think of it as a special. But, as I've always said, remember, if I can move up here to Cincinnati and end up getting acclimated to it, love it, you can too. So, in the meantime, remember to go out, fix yourself a 3-way, 4-way, or 5-way. You'll be surprised here in Cincinnati when Valentine's Day or Sweetheart's Day comes around. All the chili restaurants have on their marquee, nothing says love like a 3-way, or treat your sweetheart to a 3-way. However, here's my disclaimer. If you guys go out there and tell your wife, let's have a 3-way, don't blame me, you're on your own. Once again, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. When you try it, leave me a comment on how you do, how you like it. And thanks again for watching. Take care. God bless. And remember, above all, cooking should be fun. You really need to enjoy it. We'll see you next episode. Bye for now.